Action has long been an integral part of cinema, animation, television, and theatrics. A simple plot and underdeveloped characters can be masked by extraordinary martial arts, insane ballistics, and lens flare. You can't forget the lens flare. An intense and highly coordinated fight scene can exist solely to keep the attention of an audience, only to end up as a setup for a romantic or dramatic scene in the very next frame. You get the picture. Action is sexy, and it sells really well. It's a fluid genre and a writing tool that can be used as the main engineering plot of any story or a way to tie scenes and events together. And action films, while not being as popular today as they once were, will always be an audience draw. Being able to have down-tempo action thrillers focused around police corruption, revenge flicks that evolve into globe-trotting cinema workouts, horror films that manipulate your senses and instill fear, dread, and
emotional damage,
or martial arts rave-ups that shower set pieces with more artillery than Troa coming down from a bad shroom trip. The action genre is a time-tested standard. So color me surprised when Sakamoto Days turned out to not just be an exciting hitman manga with an endearing cast, but also a series that's able to balance carnage and domestic life, teach lessons about failed dreams, giving up an established way of life to start a family, and learning to move on from past tragedies. For a modern Shonen Jump series, Sakamoto Days really dazzles with its output, art style, pacing, and storytelling. Let's examine what makes Sakamoto Days such a standout action comedy manga, and let's compare it to some of the other manga in this genre. Sakamoto Days is centered around Taro Sakamoto, a retired hitman turned convenience store clerk, who hangs up his beretta to lay pipe on a mid-tier tsundere and start a family. Your 20s, am I right? He opens up a convenience store, goes to Nico Avocado for dieting advice, and starts a sweet family where he lives an unassuming and slow-paced life compared to his past. But Shin, a clairvoyant and former case partner of Sakamoto's, sniffs out our hero in an attempt to bring him back to the world of assassins, or back in a body bag, if he refuses. Immediately, the story places a lot of emphasis on humor. If you grew up on The Simpsons, you'll appreciate how the convenience store acts as a central hub for a lot of the plot threads, and you somehow find yourself back at this friendly and familiar place often, especially in the early chapters. As the series goes on and the cast comes together, Sakamoto starts to branch out in what it does very well. Sakamoto is docile and quiet in nature, but as his past comes looking for him, you see him start expressing himself more, and gives small hints to his mysterious past, the organization he once worked for, and his current views on violence and murder. Shin is an interesting character that steals the spotlight at times, and it's always a pleasure to see him on screen. The banter between him and Sakamoto is oddly reminiscent of Get Backers, two reluctant superpowered jobbers who find themselves helping out with neighborhood incidents in one chapter and tackling criminal organizations the next, all with a shitload of collateral damage. The action of Sakamoto Days is stellar. Now, this is a shonen, and while there are a number of violent deaths, surprise maimings, and moments where innocents are butchered for the sake of showing you just how evil a person is, there are also plenty of scenes where our main cast finds non-fatal ways to stop their aggressor. Haoi Sakamoto, Taro's loving wife, has forbidden him from killing again. Otherwise, divorce. Ah, your 30s. Am I right? This leads to a lot of interesting and exciting fights. Sakamoto has his transformation, where he leans out and becomes a stronger, faster, more durable version than his fat form. It works like a typical shonen transformation trope. However, it's an ability that isn't used very often and actually hasn't really made that much of an impact in battles so far. Sakamoto Days is a comedy series, but each battle does have consequences. Often, our heroes find themselves in a predicament when engaged in battle, but they figure out a way to come through in the end. Even as stronger villains are introduced, there's no real power creep. Battles are thrilling, and you aren't sure who's gonna do what, how, and for what reasons. Lu Xiaotang, the female lead, is such a joy to read. She greatly reminds me of Yamamoto and Gokudera from Katekyo Hitman Reborn. She's the resident martial artist of the series, and homages to Drunken Fists, Tai Chi, and DBZ are seen in her fighting stance. Seeing her interact with the Sakamotos, and Shin especially, is very fun. Between the two, it's like watching siblings squabble, and no romance is being forced between these two characters ATM, so it makes their interactions more honest and entertaining, because there isn't something obvious that they're working towards that the audience is already aware of. Heisuke Mashimo, another reoccurring character, is the resident idiot, who really reminds me of Sasagawa, actually. But he's interesting enough where you want to see him contribute to the plot and survive, even if he's engaged with humans far above anything he's able to deal with on his own. As the series goes on, the villains get really dark, and the battles super fucking bleak. Think how Hunter x Hunter got progressively darker and more gruesome over time. This series will really teach you the meaning of don't turn your head in the middle of battle. At the point of recording this, Sakamoto has only been running for a bit more than a year in Weekly Shonen Jump, so to see how quickly the show went from fun, family affairs to this is a little jarring. Something that I don't know if I'm really a fan of is the whole Eclipse style of writing that many stories are currently adopting. The Eclipse, for those of you who may not know, is one of the major story and world-altering events that happens in the classic manga Berserk, and it's something that has been mimicked with a lot of modern shows recently. To varying results. I should go deeper into this in another video, but Sakamoto Days does have a similar device thrown into the mix, and it's kind of odd. When Chainsaw Man did it a couple years ago, it worked well. Hunter x Hunter during the Chimera Ant arc was a deconstruction, which again worked really well. In this case, it feels way too soon. I think modern mangaka do themselves a disservice when they jump to catastrophic events so quickly. Sakamoto's big plot pushes feel rushed by about 20 or so chapters, and it all ends up having the same emotional impact as Gantz did when it tried to be too unpredictable. Despite some of the zany writing decisions, the art and action, again, needs to be applauded. As the stakes raise, so does the scope of the battles. We have amusement park duels, shootouts at the Science-torium, sword battles in the sewer, slugfests on the subway, and shikais having skyscrapers in the middle of metropolis Tokyo. Gunfu is the talk of the town, and I get mad John Woo vibes from this manga. That said, the physical feats of these characters are so improbable, and the juxtaposition between flabby Sakamoto and a doom and gloom enemy is a joke that gets played out from pretty early on. Overall though, I think this is a wonderful series. The humor blends very well with the action, the choreography is dead-ass stunning, and it never goes over the top. And with the introduction and expansion of several different organizations that are battling against one another, how will Sakamoto, caught up in the middle of all of this, navigate his family to safety and restore his newly adopted, happy, normal life? Sakamoto Days is a beautiful thing. If you like humor mixed with action, like what you'd see in Gintama, Reborn, Beelzebub, and other late 2000s gag manga, you'll really enjoy this series. I'm giving it a 7 out of 10.